Hey guys, welcome back to Broadway Grosses, and this week is looking fantastic for many new and old musicals, so let's get into it. I'm also a little bit sick, if you can't tell. And Juliet did 1,071,034 last week, and 1,329,607 this week, going from 96% to 100%. A Beautiful Noise last week did 56%, and this week 60%, going from 657K to 673K. Back to the Future went from 91% to 101%, and 1,126,199 to 1,432,139. Days of Wine and Roses and its last week did 64% compared to last week's 58%, and 393K to 411K. So a pretty week end for Days of Wine and Roses, and that is very disappointing, as I think it is one of the best new musicals of the season. Hadestown went from 100.99 to 101.6, and 1,026,316 to 1,117,322, with an average ticket of 150 and a top ticket of 549. Hadestown has seen a renaissance in box office, mainly due to their stunt casting, and I think this was the first week without, this person, whoever that person was, I forget the name, I think this was the first week without them, or this might have been the last week, but either way, it's doing very, very well, and I hope Hadestown can continue to go on for as many years as Phantom. I don't want this musical to close, but you have to admit, 2023, you saw the steam coming out of Hadestown, and if it had continued down that path, it most likely would have closed this year, but I think it has been saved, and will be here for at least another year. Hamilton played to 101% capacity and 1,951,748 last week to this week's 2,066,135. Hell's Kitchen played to 100% capacity for 3 performances, an average ticket of 144 and 624,961 in the bank. The capacity is pretty strong, and that average ticket and that top ticket are pretty high. And for 3 performances, it almost, it got to 624K, so it's off to a pretty good start. Better than a couple of other new musicals that have come out this season. It'll be interesting to see how this does, because I know that critics didn't love it, audiences aren't loving it, but will tourists love it? And if so, could this have a sizable time on Broadway? Again, it's too early to tell if this will close, if this will succeed. It's too early, but it's off to a very solid start. Kimberly Akimbo went from 519K to 546K, and 82% to 90%. Lempicka did 96.29 last week and 96.41% capacity this week. Last week it had 6 performances, and this week it had 7. The average ticket is very low at $58, which was down from last week's $65. And this week it played a 416K, which is not a huge increase from last week's 395K. Definitely off to a much weaker start than you would hope for. Lempicka is not a show like Akimbo that can just consistently do 4s and 5s, and needs to have that 624 like Hell's Kitchen or something. So it definitely is very concerning, especially as audiences aren't loving the new musical, and it is definitely looks more on the pricier side. I don't think it needs to make, some like a Hot Money, and I think it can do well if it's making 6 and 7 consistently, but from where I am standing, that average ticket being so low and that gross being so low as well are very concerning for Lempicka indeed. And could this be Rachel Chafkin's first flop? Maybe. I think if this gets bad reviews and maybe doesn't get nominated for Best Musical, it could close pretty early. And even if it does get a Best Musical nom, I don't think it's going to win. And again, just based off of audience responses, I don't think this is going to be a home run hit the way Hadestown was. And also, a lot of these newer musicals like Akimbo, Strange Loop, Lempicka are much more unconventional stories. And, Hamilton, Dear Evan Hansen, Hadestown, People say these are revolutionary and new and current, and that's true. But when you look at those three stories, they are very conventional and traditional and have mass appeal. And I think a musical like Lempicka, Kimberly Kimbo, don't have that same mass appeal. And I think that's the big difference we're seeing post-COVID. I also think that people, again, are not taking the same chance on new musicals, and it's not that high prestige thing that you must see that I really think Hamilton started, and that seems to have faded since COVID. Merrily continues to sell out, going from 1,613,573 to 1,527,638. So a pretty significant drop. Moulin Rouge did 99% last week and 100% this week, and 1,364,510 to this week's 1,500,000, which is very good. It's half of 2 million. And Boy George is definitely helping the box office. Spamalot went from 85% to 96%, and 899K to 1,122,786. Suffs had six performances, an average ticket of $78, and sold out with 100.45% capacity, and 460K, which is a solid start for Suffs. Definitely going to be interested to see if that gets good reviews or not. It's definitely gotten a bit of a divided response from audiences, but a solid start for Suffs, a solid start. It's better than having a 3 or 2 in front of it, which is where kind of a lot of more current musicals like Akimbo or Here Lies Love or even Lempicka started from. So, even though this is still kind of low, it's a better step and more hopeful and optimistic of a future than the, shows like it. Sweeney did 95 last week and 100% this week, and 1,362,145 this week last week to this week's 1,497,584. The Great Gatsby had 2 performances, 100% capacity. $146 was the average ticket, and it only managed to do 433K. Now, for a musical as big as Gatsby, you were probably hoping to have a 5 or a 6 in front of it. And I know it's only 2 performances, but the average ticket was pretty high, and they did sell out. So again, it's for shows like Gatsby, you don't really want to see 4s and 3s. You want to see 5s and 6s, even 7. Jeremy Jordan, Eva Noblezada, a very popular book. I personally think this is going to flop, and most audiences don't seem to love it. And if you look at advanced sales for this, it is not looking great. The Heart of Rock and Roll, which is going to flop, mark my words, just look at the advanced sales, had 2 performances, 90% capacity, and only 139,145 in the bank, with an average ticket of $71. Hell's Kitchen is actually not selling that well either. Neither is Lempicka in the next couple of weeks. Surprisingly, Suffs is selling very good, as is Back to the Future. But that's, Back to the Future, it's obvious. And surprisingly, The Outsiders is the most well-sold in advanced musical this season. But before we get to that, The Notebook did 99.77 last week and 99.75 this week, going from 895K to 946K. An average ticket of 116, a top ticket of 323. So despite bad to mixed reviews from the critics, it is still doing incredibly well. And anything that has an 8 or 9 in front of it is doing extremely well. And it doesn't even need to make like 950,000 a week, most likely. So it is doing just well. The Outsiders played to 99% last week and 100% this week for 6 performances, and 725K last week to this week's 701K, which are very solid numbers for The Outsiders. I think The Notebook and The Outsiders could be the 2 top contenders for having best business of this season. I don't think they're going to win any of the big awards, but I think that they are very popular brands, and I know a lot of people are loving The Outsiders, and I think this will do gangbusters over the summer, as will The Notebook. And based off of the numbers they've done this week, these are 2 musicals that are doing very financially solid, and this is what a successful new musical looks like. Unlike something like, Gatsby or even Lempicka. These 2 musicals with a 9 and 7 in front of it are doing better than like something like It Hot did last year or Shocked the year before. But again, I would say that, Outsiders, if Outsiders hits like 6 and Notebook hits like, 7s, that's when I'd get kind of concerned. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. Although the Notebook's advanced sales aren't looking amazing, but I think this will have good steam and good legs. The Who's Tommy played to 822K last week and 956K this week, which is very strong, going from 93% to 98%. The Wiz, with 4 performances, played to 100% capacity and 425K, which is very impressive. And their advanced sales look good. But I do think it's a limited engagement, so sadly the Marquis Theater coast is not 100% lifted. And then Waterfree Elephants went from 86% to 95% and 875K to 1,149,418. And Waterfree Elephants, it's having a comeback. I mean, this was its first good week. The average ticket went from $91 to $108, and clearly the New York Times critics picked helped a lot because it is now actually doing financially well. So hopefully for Waterfree Elephants, it can maintain that. But again, it is a very costly show. So overall, this was an amazing week for all musicals involved. And for the new musicals, despite there being so many, they're all doing pretty well. I think the only concerning ones are, in fact, Lempicka and The Great Gatsby and The Heart of Rock and Roll. But again, Great Gatsby just opened, Hell's Kitchen just opened, so we'll have to see. But this season is looking to be one of the most exciting ones yet. So let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, and comment, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.